Welcome back. You're watching The World This Week, and with us once again, Tanya Rachmanova, journalist and filmmaker, whose upcoming documentary is about
the oil in the Arctic.
Oil in the Arctic. What is a scrambler, you could say.
Oh, yes.
For hydrocarbons. Also with us, Christopher Dickey of The Daily Beast, Régis Le Sommier of the French news weekly magazine Paris Match. What's on the cover this week?
Mick Jagger.
Mick Jagger, sad tale. And Sylvain Attal, editor-in-chief of France24.com. Turks got a bit of a shock this Friday. Twitter shut down by the government with less than 10 days to go until local elections, with the country's prime minister embroiled in both a graft scandal and a power play among Islamists. Recep Tayyip Erdogan, once again, defiant.
Can you imagine? There are international conspiracies. Twitter, we have a court order now. We will wipe out all of these. I don't care what the international community says. Everyone will see how powerful the Republic of Turkey is.
Sylvain Attal, by the way, that didn't stop one candidate from Erdogan's party from tweeting that he had a campaign rally today.
First of all, it shows that the web is vulnerable. But with the 3G smartphone or 4G smartphone, it's not so easy to block anything. So that's the first remark. Second, we've been talking about weakness or strength. It's obviously a show of weakness on part of Erdogan. I mean, the guy is losing his mind. It's so stupid, and the fact that
Putin is crazy like a fox, but Erdogan is losing his mind.
Yeah, I think so. Because remember that even the Egyptian never tried to block Twitter, for example.
Not for any length of time.
No. I mean, and he won't succeed because the Turkish obviously are going to continue to tweet by other means. So it's ineffective, it's stupid, and then it shows that this time it's the end of the Turkish model. We've been talking about Turkish model a lot of times during the Arab Spring and so on. There's no Turkish model. I mean, the democracy is still vulnerable in Turkey, and well, it's the end of its reign. We're going to see the results of the elections, but maybe not these elections, because obviously there's a lot of people who don't care. I mean, in some region of inside Turkey, profound inside Turkey, it's not. Turkey is not Istanbul. I mean, I'm sure that people are not tweeting so much deep inside Turkey. But and the fact that Abdullah Gül, the president, which is a member of his own party, I mean the AKP, is saying that it was a mad decision, indicates that, I mean, probably it's the end of Erdogan.
That's an interesting point. For the second time this week, the country's president defying Erdogan. First, he dismissed conspiracy theories to explain Turkey's political turmoil. And then the tweet that Sylvain was mentioning: a complete ban on social media platforms cannot be approved. It is not technically possible to totally block access to platforms used all over the world. Christopher Dickey.
Well, what I love is listening to Erdogan talk about Twitter as if it's the great enemy of the Turkish people, because he doesn't like some of the things that people are tweeting. It really does sound like he's nuts. I completely agree. It's a huge, terrible sign of weakness. And in fact, Twitter has exploded in Turkey over the last day or so, ever since this happened. Everybody's going out to prove that they can tweet, including, as you say, President Abdullah Gül. So I think that I couldn't agree more. I think this is just a terrible sign of weakness. And you can't block the web like this. You have to deal with it one way or the other. But the problem is everything is closing in on Erdogan, and he's just been in power too long. Eventually, after more than a dozen years in power, you get to the point where people are tired of you. You've committed a lot of crimes, or at least done a lot of things that people will call crimes, and you're going to pay the price.
Régis Le Sommier?
Well, I think Erdogan is obviously a corrupt leader on his last throws, and that
his last throws, because as Sylvain mentioned, you go to Anatolia, you go to the heartland of Turkey. He still has a lot of supporters.
But I don't think this very argument about Twitter is it's a bit like, you want your country to be part of the modern world. I mean, Turkey has, and he himself has portrayed himself for a long time as being a moderate Islamist, a moderate Muslim, with, still showing and leading, in a way.
He's redefined many times in the international policy of Turkey. He wanted to appear as a strongman, but in a modern way. And this way of attacking Twitter is really something like Twitter is part of the Western world. So is it part of the Western world, or is it a network that people are using in Turkey? It's a double-edged sword. You can't use that argument. It's really somebody who's despaired, I think.
Tanya Rachmanova?
I don't know. For me, it's either he's despaired and especially abandoned by his advisors, because any reasonable advisor would say that you can't block Twitter. Being prime minister, to say something that you can't do, it's the most stupid thing that can happen.
Yeah.
Or he's switching to the right. And he's not speaking, a little bit like Putin. He's not speaking to the people who are tweeting, that he's talking to the other audience. And when he says, I don't care what the West is thinking, well, this is, he is
sounds
not
familiar.
addressing, he sounds familiar. He's not addressing the people who are tweeting. He is speaking to his other audience. And
Next thing you know, he's going to take Crimea.
Yeah, yeah, that's he said it as well. So maybe, so I think he's just a little bit moving to the right, to a more conservative audience, if he's intelligent, or he's completely abandoned by his advisors and he's doing stupid things, which I don't believe, because I don't think he's so stupid.
By the way, local elections in Turkey fall the same day as the second round of local elections in France. The left expected to lose badly, but avoid a rout thanks to inroads by the far-right National Front. There'll be three-way races in lots of places, and infighting and scandal among the right, the more traditional right. Just look at Nicolas Sarkozy. Just as the former president was quietly plotting a comeback, a new batch of leaked audio tapes that have the president referring to investigating magistrates as, and I quote, the bastards from Bordeaux, investigators who are not amused. They're probing whether the then president tried to obstruct the inquiry into his 2007 campaign finances, and see the tapes as further fodder for that. Sarkozy has gone on the offensive, though. This Friday, a column in conservative daily Le Figaro, where he hints the orders come from the top. From President Hollande, he warns readers to watch what they say to him on the telephone. It's not an excerpt from that wonderful movie, The Lives of Others, on East Germany and the activities of the Stasi. It's the doings of the same world. It's not the doings of some world dictator aimed at his opponents. It's about France, he says. The Stasi remark, getting the goat of François Hollande, who rebutted from the European summit in Brussels. And in those remarks, François Hollande saying that this was unacceptable for France. Régis Le Sommier, it's surreal that A, Sarkozy breaks his silence in such a manner, and B, that the President of the Republic responds in such a manner.
Well, yes, I'm not surprised that Sarkozy has been literally boiling for a long time, and not really trying to find out when it would be the appropriate time to make a comeback, or to at least start its comeback. And his advisor, people around him have been urging him to, refrain. But this time he could not refrain, and he used the Figaro to do this. But, honestly, Sarkozy at this time makes me think of former governor of the state of New York, Elliot Spitzer, who was involved in a scandal. I mean, the comparison, you'll see where the comparison goes, but he was involved in a scandal with, going to Washington, D.C. and being found with prostitute. But he was caught because of a law he himself put in place, which was a law of transfer of funds between states. And there were some suspicious activities on his account, and that's how the FBI found out. Well, then this time around, Sarkozy is being wiretapped and by the measures that he took himself while being the Minister of the Interior in 2004 and while being himself the President in 2007. So he got caught this time, and he's complaining about this, claiming it looks like the Stasi, or, using the analogy to The Lives of Others, wonderful movie, but he himself widened the power of the judges and the power of the police. So he's, that's I think the analogy stands with Elliot Spitzer.
Which broaches the question, Sylvain Attal, Can Nicolas Sarkozy come back?
Well, I have mixed feelings about this story. You know, first, the allusion to the Stasi is insane, absolutely insane. But second, you know, I'm still waiting for the smoking gun in these tapes showing that Sarkozy is a crook, for example. Still have not seen that, and even the reason why he was listened by the judge for such a long period, because after all, it was. According to what we know, the judge started to monitor his conversation in September, so it's a long time. But perhaps we don't know everything, and that's my third remark. Is I'm still wondering why Sarkozy changed his agenda and decided, obviously, to make this kind of comeback much earlier. It's too early for him, and I think that. The guy is afraid. We've been talking about sign of weakness. It's a sign of weakness. He's afraid to be left alone. He's afraid that probably we're going to see that after this local election in France, someone like Juppé, for example,
the mayor of Bordeaux.
Yeah, he's going to be re-elected in the first round as mayor of Bordeaux. Actually, he's always re-elected in the first round, but it's not the problem. He's going to be kind of, you know, the kind of very...
He'll be the rising star within the opposition.
You know, matured, and although he had also his problem with justice, Juppé, we shall recall. But the guy is afraid, and he's afraid of discovering something in the papers maybe in 1 week or 2 weeks, and maybe it's not this conscious for him. I don't know, but I'm puzzled, and I'm still have mixed feeling because I have not seen yet what's, you know, the smoking gun, the thing, because everyone has said in a conversation, those bastards. I mean, sure, you yourself and me use.
Well, it's not so much those remarks. It's more the idea that in the conversations, there's him talking about getting a friendly judge appointed.
We don't know who is that friendly. You know, there's the friendly judge, but after all, this guy was not appointed. He was not appointed in Monaco, as we said, for example, which we have shown, for example, the exchange of services. There's no smoking gun. To this point, there's no smoking gun.
By which way do you report this story, Christopher Dickey?
Well, I think you report it as a matter of personalities and narratives. I think we don't know if there's a smoking gun. Maybe Sarkozy knows if there's a smoking gun, or maybe he's trying to remember if there's a smoking gun. But I think that essentially what's interesting here is his personality. Look, he's one of the most colorful people we've had on the French political scene in a long time. I'm very glad to see him back. I love to write about Sarkozy. He's really interesting. Hollande is so boring. Even when he has affairs, he's boring. Sarkozy is great to write about. But the other thing is the narrative. And the narrative that Sarkozy's creating is interesting. Somebody's compared it to Berlusconi in Italy. He's trying to create this narrative where no matter what comes out, he can say, you see, they victimized me again. It's the Stasi coming after me again. And that's essentially what he's doing. And so you write about that too. You say, this is the narrative he's creating. And then you say, these are the facts. But the truth is nobody outside France and precious few people inside France can follow the facts of this case. They're not going to get into all the minutiae of his relationship with his lawyer. And the only thing they'll remember is those bastards in Bordeaux, which, as you say, everybody said that. You probably say it all the time, François.
not of anyone in Bordeaux, but go ahead, Tanya.
Yeah, it's just after, I did this series on spin doctors several years ago. And from this point of view, and I know that Sarkozy, when he was a president, he was the main spin doctor himself. And he did a great thing. I mean, maybe he's wrong, but I understand why he came out now. First, as you say, he positioned himself as a victim. We can discuss if he is or not, but still, he did position himself as a victim right before the election. So we are very much interested in France politics, and he became like a UMP leader before somebody else is coming out after the elections. So I think that from the spin point of view, he did the right thing. Now, if there is he is right, he is wrong, smoking gun, that's not important. What is important is the announcement and the buzz he created. And
so can he make a comeback?
Well, I think you're right. He could make a comeback because what it showed, by looking at him and seeing him on the cover of the Figaro today, is that there are actually no leaders on the right. I mean, no people. I mean, so we can, so for the hardcore, supporters of the right. I mean, he's the guy who had the guts to say, what he felt, and who appeared as a potential leader for 2000, for the next elections. So that's what it showed. I mean, I don't know that the when you analyze, when you take, that might be very early in the game, but it shows that there's a lack of leader on the right.
All right, presidential elections in 2017 in this country. Full coverage of local elections, though, on France24.com over the next 2 weekends. She's only got one unnamed source, but New York Times journalist Carlotta Gall insists it's rock solid. In a piece that previews her upcoming book, The Wrong Enemy, America in Afghanistan, she writes, according to one inside source, the ISI, that's Pakistan's intelligence services, actually ran a special desk assigned to handle Osama bin Laden. It was operated independently, led by an officer who made his own decisions and did not report to a superior. He handled only one person, bin Laden. Régis Sommier, this is a story that caught your eye this week.
Yeah, very much so, because it contradicts everything that has been said by the U.S. Since the death of Osama bin Laden, and it proves, if there's one source you're saying, but there's she's a very seasoned reporter. I mean, Carlotta Gall has been covering that area for a long time, and she's very credible in what she says. And the fact that the piece, what she writes in the piece is more than, the only surveillance of Osama bin Laden. It goes more about the intimate of the level of surveillance the ISI has over the Pakistani society and over maneuvers towards Afghanistan, and how they control the Taliban, basically. So it proves that how do you fight the war on terror with allies like this? I mean, how do you? Of course, the U.S. had no choice but to push Pervez Musharraf to their side after 9/11, but ever since the beginning, the game was twisted, and that's what this article, which is very important, I think, proves. It's we've been fighting this war, and the U.S. and the Western world, with an ally that has been, somehow protecting the very guys we were fighting.
Chris Ruzicki, when you were researching your book on policing New York City and how they go after terrorists, was this obvious to you? What's in this article?
Well, I have a lot of problems with this article. I think, first of all, that Carlotta is a great reporter, and she's been in Afghanistan for a long time. And I think she became absolutely convinced that the ISI, the Pakistani intelligence service, was running bin Laden in some way. But essentially, you can't go to one source in that kind of environment and say, there you go, it's the smoking gun. It's not a smoking gun, one unnamed source. It's really a very weakly sourced accusation. The broader question of whether the ISI was in conflict with the United States, absolutely true. But there's one thing that you don't read in Carlotta's article in the New York Times, maybe it's in her book, and that is any mention of India. There's no sense that the Pakistanis are obsessed with the idea that India is going to flank them in Afghanistan. There's no idea that India is supporting Karzai. There's no idea of any of that. And it's a little bit, excuse me, I've got a terrible cold. It's a little bit like the problem with Putin. You look at it from one perspective, you don't look at it from other perspectives, and then you don't understand it except in a very narrow gauge way, which can be deeply misleading. And I think that article, as it appears in the New York Times, is misleading, because it doesn't give the Pakistanis any credit for any national interest except supporting bin Laden, screwing with the United States, overthrowing Karzai and making problems, and trying to control the Taliban. Why? Because they like the Taliban so much? No, because they want to keep India out of Afghanistan.
Want to keep India out of Afghanistan. Christopher, when you look now at the situation, is the United States handling Pakistan the right way? And is Pakistan handling the Taliban the right way?
Well, I think the United States is in a terrible position now in Afghanistan. And I think the Afghans who've been working closely with the United States are in a terrible position. I think the United States is going to pull out. I think that Pakistanis are always going to be the neighbors of Afghanistan, and they are always going to be concerned about the Indians. And I don't think that the United States and NATO policy there has done anything to resolve those problems. That's the kind of situation that Dick Holbrooke was working on in the early days of the Obama administration. He died, and although he was replaced, there was never any really dynamic force pushing an overall settlement and understanding. And that was what was needed before. It's what's needed now, but it's not going to happen. So I think, in fact, Afghanistan is going to head south. And I think that the ISI is going to do all the things it did before in order to try and have a malleable government there. And if that means having the Taliban back or having some terrorists there, as long as they don't affect Pakistan, that'll be okay with Islamabad.
Tanya Rachmanova?
No, I completely agree that Osama bin Laden, the story of Osama bin Laden, I don't know, when you read the article, there is a lot of conditionals, some sources. So a little bit, you don't know if it's true or not, but the overall story is true. And I think this, and what is interesting, like you look at Pakistan, who is not really following the American policy. You look at Turkey, Erdogan, who says, I don't care about the international community. And then you go back to Putin, who is what he is, and you think there is this
common thread.
Big part of the world where the NATO policy doesn't really work. Well, probably not necessarily NATO, but American-led policy doesn't work. And that's what I read through this article, what sort of worries me the most, that, this sort of unified, unique, allied policy doesn't work anymore.
Right, one size fits all doesn't work.
Yeah.
Before we go, I just want to show you something. It was day 12 of that unbearable wait that's still going on for news of Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. The daily press conference in Sepang, Malaysia. An angry Chinese relative of one of the passengers escorted out. She and others have been demanding that the Malaysian government provide more information. Full disclosure, I guess hardly the mantra for the party that's been in power for almost continuously since independence in 1957. Sylvain Attal, when we look at this story, are we beating up too much on the Malaysian government?
I think what's terrible is that people are beginning to have jokes about this story. And there's hundreds of families that are in the waiting, and it's terrible. And this picture shows how terrible it is. And but we're going to have a lot of conspiracy theories, obviously, after 12 days of waiting. And honestly, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to say. I don't want to make jokes about this story. I have no explanation. No one's has any explanation. Are we doing too much? I don't know. It's a fascinating story, don't you think?
Régis Le Sommier.
Well, to think that in the year 2014 that an entire airplane can disappear after taking off somewhere for 12 days is just mind-boggling, I think. And we have to be humble with that because we just rely on. I mean, however, what we're seeing on that footage is that the way the Malaysian government and authority apparently handled the situation was not clear from the beginning. I mean, there was many people talking. There was this general, Air Force general talking, and then there was another official saying the exact opposite. So it's been very, very hard on the family with the fact that somehow they along the way they could think that their loved ones had survived. Maybe they were, they landed somewhere and they were going to be held hostage, but still alive. With that in mind, it's very terrible not to know if. I would at this point like to find debris in the for good who said this is even if we don't know, even if we find traces right now, there will still be some lingering questions on how that airplane took off from Kuala Lumpur on his way to China and find itself all the way to the Indian Ocean or wherever. That would be still a big question because apparently it flew many hours, being seemingly being undetected. But so that would trigger different question. But I would at this point for these families, the answer would be, have their loved ones disappeared? Are they dead? Are they dead? That's the biggest question of all, I think.
All right, and it's a story that we will, of course, continue to follow here on France 24. I want to thank our panel, Régis Le Sommier, Tanya Rachmanova, Christopher Dickey, and Sylvain Attal. Thank you for joining us here. Much more to come at the top of the hour.
Europe Now.
Will these checkpoints soon belong to history? It's been exactly 40 years since Cyprus was cut in two, with the buffer zone running through the island like a scar. But this time, optimists believe a deal is within reach. The economic crisis and the discovery of gas reserves in the Mediterranean Sea could act as a catalyst for reuniting the island once and for all.
Europe Now, en France 24, en France24.com.